Good afternoon, friends. My name is Beth and welcome to my channel, Watercolor Painting in the Afternoon. I have been thinking lately about composition, and I know that there are lots of different ways that you can compose a painting. But today I wanted to concentrate on something called the rule of thirds. I hear painters talk about this all of the time, but I seldom hear anybody really explain it. And since I've done a quick study on it, I kind of understand why they don't explain it. It's not that it's hard, it's that it's a little bit hard to explain. And so I thought I would draw some thumbnail sketches today and just let you see what it means, at least as far as I understand it. And I do think it's going to improve my compositions. And you know, I've gotten better at drawing elements within a composition, but arranging them still is hard for me. So I'm going to start out today with a landscape type composition, which I'm just drawing these thumbnails, but just putting my paper, putting my painting, drawing, slash whatever this is, into a landscape position. This is what the rule of thirds does. It divides the paper into three, going this way, and three going this way. You want it to be approximately equal, each of these sections, so that it's approximately a third. And I know that I didn't get that perfect, but that's, you know, it's okay. I didn't get it perfect. And I hope you can see that really well. If not, I could use a pen. Let me use a pen and see if we get a better visual of that. So here's my landscape paper, the way that it's arranged here, and here's the way it's divided into thirds. And what the rule of thirds says is that when you are putting your main subject into your landscape or whatever it is you're painting, try to use one of these four focal points. If you use the lower focal point, balance is going to be important, especially, I think, because it just looks so heavy on one side. So if I put my main focus right here, let's say I've got a barn right there, you know, and that's my main focal point, and it runs through this line and through this line. And then my horizon is pretty much on the lower third here, so let's just make some hilly horizon right there. And then the rest can be sky, or you can have something over here. Now suppose you have in the background, you have some mountains coming up this way. But that doesn't really do anything here. I don't know. See, this is what I don't know. Does this count as balancing that? I kind of think it does. So if we shade it in a little bit, that gives it more gravitas, it gives it more weight. And we're going to shade in the barn as well. All right, I think there's balance there. I think we added this to balance this. And now we can do what we want. Maybe it's a dramatic sky, you know, and or whatever. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not a very dramatic sky at all. It doesn't matter. You can also, you know, put whatever you want in the foreground, you know, maybe some little shrubs and trees and things, you know, just things that you see over here in the foreground. So that's rule of thirds. Let's do something portrait style. I hope I'm doing this right. This is what I think it is. This is what I think they mean when they're talking about rule of thirds. I have studied it a little bit. I've listened to what people have to say. I've read articles. And it's not the simplest thing in the world, although people say, oh, it's so easy, just use the rule of thirds. But rules, it seems to me, are kind of made to be broken, you know, and people will use the rule of thirds kind of, and then say, see, it's the rule of thirds. Well, kind of. You're just going, is it or isn't it? So what if we were to put a vase of flowers right here? Well, the rule of thirds might ask us not to stick our vase right in the middle. Maybe the rule of thirds would say, stick your vase more over to the side. All right? And then maybe your flowers then can come, maybe your main flower is right there, you know? And you've got other flowers. Maybe there's another one right here, maybe, but it's lesser in size. Maybe there are some things going on over here and up here and over here, you know? But what you have in your composition is focal point, here, and even to a lesser degree here. But these two things are balancing each other out, and maybe the edge of your table can be kind of along this line right here, and maybe you've got a little shadow going on down that way, or maybe in the background you've got a little window or something going on back here. I don't know. But your rule of thirds has made a nice composition. All right, the first thing I've done in my little baby sketchbook here is that I've turned this with some tape into a portrait style page. The first thing that I did was mark off my grid, and I know it's probably really hard to see because it's in a very light pencil mark, but the one horizontal line is here, one here, one here, and one here. And what I did was to draw a vase right here. This is the center of that bottom horizontal intersection, horizontal and vertical right here. So the vase is going straight up into this vertical line on that third. Now my main flower is going to go here. I can make it nice and big if I want. The other flower, a smaller flower, is going to go here. And then I'm going to do some filling, do some fill work. And I think I'm going to put this on a rounded table. So I'm going to curve my line down a little bit, just like that. I don't know what I'm going to do with the background yet. I have to think on it. And I don't know what kind of flowers I'm going to do, so let me think on it, and I'll come back when I have some ideas. Okay, I think I want my painting to look something like this. I drew my thirds on this page, right across here and right across here. I've got the vase along this vertical line, the main flower right here at this point, a secondary flower, and then a third one hanging down that way, a little bud. All right, I've got the shadow going off this way to kind of help be a line to draw your eye here, and hopefully the table is enough to balance the bulk of the main flowers. So there's my little sketchy sketch. I guess it's time to see how this works. All right, this is try number 2 on the audio because my cats kept fighting while I was trying to record. Erasing the lines that I made for my rule of thirds, and making sure that the paper is clean before I begin to paint. Now I'm recording this separately, and I don't have a script for this, so I'm just going to wing it and just going to try to give you information as I go along. Here are my 3 brushes. I've got a 2, 1, and a 4.
I think, no, I've got a number 2 liner, a number 2 round, and a number 4 round. And here we are starting out to paint the main flower. I'm going to use alizarin crimson, a nice strong paint color there, and then some Jaune Brilliant to make it kind of a coral pink. And of course, we begin with the main petal, and this was going to be a rose. It was supposed to be a rose, and I just started painting a peony. I don't know what happened. But yeah, I mean, it's okay, and I really like peonies, so I started painting this peony, and that's the main flower here. You just sort of do some initial petals out front, and then you do some roughly petals in the back, because peonies are often, unless they're very simple peonies, they're often very thick with petals, and they're very roughly in the center and pretty. Notoriously hard to paint, but I don't think so. I think they're fairly easy to paint once you get it down. Now here I'm coming over and putting in what I consider to be the secondary flower. I don't know if that's a thing or not, but it's just my secondary, my thoughts on it, or it's a secondary flower. It's not the main focal point. And this one's not open quite as much as the first one. So here I'm just adding in a little bit of darker red at the bottom, letting it spread up into those initial petals. And then it's time to finish out the peony. There's the center of the bud, and then a lot of little indications of petals that are starting to curl outward and open up. This is a small painting, so I don't have to get too detailed with it. I don't have to put in every tiny little bit. Now I'm going to make the purple color with ultramarine blue. I'm adding it to that pink. And I want to make some filler flowers for this vase of flowers, just things that fill in between the main peonies there. And I suppose that I was either making something like a hyacinth or maybe a lupine or something like that. I really didn't have a specific flower in mind. I wanted to just paint something simple. So I painted 2 petals on the outside and 1 on the inside so that it looks like maybe a little, like you're looking at the flower from the side. It's got maybe 5 petals in all, but you can only see 3 of them because you're looking on it from the side. And that's a very simple little flower to paint. You can paint them in bunches like this and call it whatever you want to call it. You can call it a hyacinth or lupine or lavender, whatever you want to call it. And of course, I'm just winging this part. I really didn't have a solid idea of what the fillers were going to look like. And I like purple with pink. I think it looks really nice, and I think this particular combination looks nice. This is going to be a very colorful painting in the end, so I wanted to pick bright and cheerful colors. Now here I was mixing a little bit more red so that I could paint the final bud, and I wanted it to be a little darker than the ones that had opened. So, and it's just a blob. It really is. It's just a blob of paint. And it's got maybe a little bit of form to it, but not a whole lot. Your eye, if you see those two flowers, your eye is going to believe that that's a bud. So you don't have to get so microscopic with your, with your details if you're painting, especially if you're painting small like this. Now this is a cobalt blue that I'm using to paint the vase. And I think at some point I switched to a larger brush because switched to a larger brush because it was going to take me forever to do that. But cobalt blue and, again, the pink, the purple, the blue, very nice, cool colors, I think. I think the pink even is a pretty cool color. And then coming back with ultramarine for the shadow part of the vase. You can just touch your paint into the wet paint, your darker shadow colors into the wet paint, and it will kind of spread out and make your shadow unique and do it for you. And here finally I'm going to put in some of the shadow colors in the peony, especially in the main one. You want some of those shadow colors. You don't want it to all be one, just one tint. You want darker values. You want to be able to see some of the movement of the flower. Sometimes flower petals have veins, and you want to try to put some of those in, and put some of the, especially near the center of the flower. Sometimes it's a little bit darker. So always put your dark values in, and sometimes you'll think, oh, that was too dark. But when it dries, it's going to be so much lighter that you sometimes end up going back and doing it again just because it wasn't enough. I'm putting a few little green specks on top of my purple spiky flowers. And those just indicate little buds that haven't opened yet. And then finally I'm going to put in some leaves. And I really tried, as I was doing the leaves, to put them in, to just wiggle the brush around when I was putting them in so that it didn't look quite so stiff. It looks more organic, I think, if you do that. And I wanted to make this piece look as organic as I could in the, given the small space that I gave myself to paint in. Here we're using yellow ochre for the table. Yellow ochre maybe with a pinch of darker brown like a burnt umber. And then finally the shadow there. And now I wanted to get closer up so that you could see what I was doing with the background. So I also slowed the film down a little bit again. So this is done in real time. And what I'm doing is just wetting down the background, getting as close to the flowers as I can without touching any wet paint. And I'm going to put the background in and just sort of let that paint do its own thing. That's why I'm wetting it down first. I want to do this technique wet into wet, and or wet into damp, however you want to say that, and just let it kind of do its own thing. Now, this works best on 100% cotton paper, of course, but it works pretty well on this paper too. You just have to get it evenly damp. And here I'm dropping in that little bit of yellow, and it looks a lot like I think I've got just mostly yellow ochre and maybe a little bit of brighter deep yellow on the brush there. I'm just dropping it right into that wet surface of the paper and letting it do its thing. Right up against the petal of the flower. And then out from there. I'm also keeping the background nice and light, because if I try to make a dark background after I've painted everything in like that, you're going to see the lines around the flowers where I haven't put the background paint in. And it just, it just makes it look funny. So if you really have to put a dark background onto your painting, I think probably the easiest way to do it is to use masking fluid. I haven't had any masking fluid for a while, and in part it's because it seems to want to tear my paper up, and that's because I'm not using a very high quality cotton paper right now, especially in little paintings like this. I'm just when I'm practicing like this and I'm trying to figure things out, I just don't want to use a really expensive piece of paper. And maybe someday I will be able to do that. I'll be able to afford the more expensive paper even for my practice sessions. But for right now, this is it. So that's why I'm keeping this background fairly light, so that it doesn't have to have masking fluid, and I don't have to do too much really tiny detailed negative painting trying to get the background just right. And of course here I wanted to add just a few details to the leaves. I didn't want to leave the greenery completely just bland. You need a second and sometimes a third tone in that same color green. You need to have something deeper so that it looks like there are some shadows involved in your painting. Shadows are so important, and you can use just local color. Just like I'm not using a gray to make the shadows on the leaves. I'm using a deeper green because the leaves are green and the shadow is going to be green. And I'm trying to use these organic brush strokes and not be too fussy, but at the same time, allow your eye to see that there is something going on. So much more interesting when you don't just stick with one tone of your color, that you go with another, another value. If you stick with just one value, it's just so boring. Filling in a little bit at the bottom of that base.
So here is the final result of the experiment, and this is a very small scale painting that I wanted to do because I didn't want to try to do something large scale when I'm just practicing and trying to get used to something. So this is it, and I hope you enjoyed watching that, and I think it's successful. I think it looks okay. The main blossom here, it turned into a peony. I thought it was going to be a rose, but it turned into a peony. And these other two form a triangle, which is also something that composition likes. This flower is in the intersection between the right vertical line and the top horizontal line. This flower is in the intersection between the right vertical line and the top horizontal line. And this bud falls straight underneath the main one. So all of this is being balanced by the vase, and then the entire thing is being balanced by the table, I think. I hope. And I think the shadow kind of helps you to move your eye up there toward the main flower. I might, if I were really going to get picky about how this looks, I might come back with a little more purple here and there and just, put in a little dot of shadow in each of these little purple flowers, and that might make a difference in how you perceive this is rather than just being a ridiculously simple picture. You put some detail in and it makes it look a little bit better. Maybe a little of that purple right along the darkest part of the shadow there. But I think composition wise that this is a relatively successful trial, and I'm going to continue to try to use this on some of my other paintings. Maybe I'll do a larger painting next using the same type of composition but a different subject matter. So I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope you got something out of it. I really am working hard on trying to be more cohesive in my painting, and I hope that helped you too. The rule of thirds might be worth knowing. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.